Murder Memorabilia, Episode 1, The Clock That Stopped Twice. A cozy mystery short story by Wynne Valentine. The clock was ticking. That was the first thing Calla noticed when she unlocked the front door of Second Chance's Antiques. Not the scent of lavender polish or Baxter's disgruntled snort as he waddled past her into the shop, but the soft, unmistakable tick, tick, tick coming from the back room. It shouldn't have been ticking. She stood in the doorway a moment longer than usual, key still in hand, brows knit. Her antique shop didn't hum to life unless she made it. The lights didn't flicker on, no motion sensors clicked. The dust stayed politely settled until she stirred it. But that tick, that was a heartbeat in a place full of ghosts. Baxter, her 12-year-old Basset hound and semi-retired clue detector, paused halfway to his dog bed, ears twitching. He gave a low, expressive growl and sat right in the middle of the rug, facing the hallway like a sentry. His eyes followed her, as if asking, "Are you sure you want to see what that is?" She wasn't. But Calla Finch didn't make a habit of ignoring strange sounds, especially not ones that came from the red shelf. She followed the ticking. The hallway to the back room felt longer than usual. The air was cool, still holding the night's chill, and smelled faintly of old wood, metal polish, and something mustier, like forgotten velvet. The door to the red shelf was ajar. She hadn't left it that way. Her fingers brushed the edge of the curtain as she pushed inside. The room was dim, the filtered light from the stained glass casting bruised blue shadows across the shelves. A few particles of dust shimmered where the sun snuck through a crack in the curtains. And there, dead center, on the middle shelf, under its glass dome, the clock that stopped twice. It ticked on steadily. The brass hands vibrated with energy, trembling minutely as if resisting the urge to spin. Calla's breath fogged the glass as she leaned in. "You're not due until Tuesday." She checked the label, handwritten in her precise block lettering. Item, the clock that stopped twice. History, matched time of death in 2 separate cases, 5 years apart. Rumor, ticks when another death is near. Status, dormant, only ticks on Tuesdays. But it was Wednesday. She tapped the glass dome lightly. The ticking didn't pause. It didn't even stutter. Baxter had inched closer without her noticing. He sat just outside the threshold, refusing to cross into the red shelf room, as he always did. But his hackles were raised. He made a soft, huffing sound, not quite a growl, not quite a warning. Calla stood there for a long moment, watching the second hand jerk from one notch to the next. Her breath steadied. Her mind began to catalog. The clock had only ever ticked twice before. The first time, a local historian had collapsed during a reenactment at the town square. Heat stroke, they'd said, until someone found traces of belladonna in his drinking flask. The second time, a retired banker slipped in her kitchen and hit her head, only it turned out she'd been dead before the fall, a quiet poisoning. Arsenic in her sugar bowl. The spoon still sat in evidence, tarnished and harmless now. Calla hadn't made the connection the first time, but the second time she'd been ready. And she'd added the clock to the red shelf with a note of caution and a circle around its ticking schedule. Tuesdays. Only. But today wasn't Tuesday, which meant the clock was trying to tell her something. Something, or someone, was about to die. Winnie Snow arrived at 9:02 a.m. sharp, wearing a scarf the size of a blanket and sunglasses large enough to qualify as windshields. She breezed into the shop with the force of a social hurricane, trailing the smell of clove gum and last week's gossip. "Morning, Calla," she chirped, setting her oversized tote on the counter with a thunk. "You're not going to believe who's back." Calla didn't look up from the ledger she was dutifully ignoring. "I probably will." Winnie beamed. Henrietta Bell, back in town after 5 years. Just strolled into the market last night like she never left. Ella's pen stilled. The Bell house is still standing? Technically, Winnie said, waving a hand. Leaning a bit. The porch looks like it's auditioning for a haunting, but yes. And guess who was spotted hammering at the front steps? Calla raised a brow. Cal Price? Winnie gave a pleased little clap. You do believe me. Baxter let out a snort from beneath the counter. Calla leaned against the glass. Henrietta's mother died there. Didn't she? Disappeared, Winnie corrected, delighted. River was high that week. The story is she went out for a walk and never came back. No funeral, no body. Just Henrietta packing up and leaving town, and now she's back. Winnie lowered her voice. She was playing the piano when I passed by this morning. Same song her mother always used to mangle. Greensleeves. Gave me goosebumps. Calla didn't respond immediately. Her eyes drifted toward the back hallway, toward the ticking that hadn't stopped. I'm telling you, Winnie said, gathering her tote, that house never liked silence. Something's awake again. As she left, Baxter gave a single huff and wandered toward the hallway, pausing just outside the red shelf door. He didn't growl this time, but he didn't go in either. The clock ticked again the next day. Same time. 3:17 p.m. Calla stood in the doorway of the red shelf, arms crossed over her chest, spine tense. It was one thing for an object to act up once. It happened. Summerwind had its share of odd vibrations and inexplicable echoes, but twice? At the exact same time? That was pattern. That was intent. And intent made her uneasy. The second hand on the brass clock trembled with purpose, leaping forward every second with a kind of certainty she wished she felt. It wasn't a casual tick. It was a countdown. Baxter, lounging a few feet behind her on the faded runner rug, lifted his head and gave a slow, guttural whine. Not fear, more like irritation. Like he'd seen this movie before and knew the ending wasn't going to be any good. She scribbled in her notebook. Day 2, 3:17 p.m., clock active again. No unusual customers. No power surges. Possible connection to Henrietta Bell? As she underlined the time, a faint sound crept through the stillness. A melody, soft and broken. Her eyes snapped to the upper shelf. The music box that skips was humming again, playing Greensleeves, just as Winnie had mentioned. The same song the Bell woman had been heard playing that morning. The box was still closed, no visible movement, but the tune stumbled through its familiar miss. The fourth note skipped. Every time. She watched, waiting for the lid to creak open. It didn't. The box played on a beat longer, then stopped mid-phrase like it had been interrupted. A chill crawled up her arms. Greensleeves, the Bell house, the ticking clock. They weren't coincidences, not in Summerwind, not with a red shelf item involved. She took a cautious step forward and crouched beside the display. Something was off. A corner of the felt under the glass dome looked lifted. She reached in with a pencil and pried it gently. There, folded in two like a forgotten note, was a piece of paper, old, yellowed. She teased it out and unfolded it carefully. Sheet music. The notation was clumsy in places, the staff lines slightly uneven, as if written by hand in a rush or through trembling fingers. The ink had bled slightly at the edges. There were a few smudges. And in the top corner, June 3rd, 5 years ago. Calla's breath caught. The exact date Henrietta's mother had disappeared. She stared down at the page. The melody was Greensleeves, but incomplete. No lyrics, no signature, just a timestamp. A ghost written in ink. Baxter crept closer and gave the music a sniff. Then, with a soft grunt, he sat facing the clock. Calla folded the paper and slipped it into her notebook. If the town was waking up old secrets, she wasn't going to let them rise alone. The bell over the shop door jingled at precisely the wrong moment. Calla had been in the middle of reshelving a collection of antique butter knives, most of which had unsettling inscriptions like "Spread with love" and "She deserved it." "Hell is open," she muttered without looking up. "And the weird twins have arrived," Juniper announced. "We're not twins," Rex added. "We're just cursed with the same face." Calla sighed and turned toward the goth teens who had made her shop their unofficial haunt. Juniper wore a velvet jacket covered in enamel pins and suspicion. Rex had a messenger bag that rattled ominously whenever he moved. "What's vibrating back there?" Calla asked. "Stick of bones." "Limited edition," Rex said. "It hums near haunted stuff." "Which is why we're here," Juniper said, marching straight past her toward the back. "The music box that skips is out of alignment. I could hear it from the street." "You live 3 blocks away." "Exactly." Calla followed them with reluctant curiosity. Baxter, ever the referee, trotted behind with a grunt. Juniper stopped just short of the red velvet curtain that separated the red shelf from the rest of the shop. "Do I have your permission to commune with it?" "No," Calla said. "Absolutely not." Juniper peered over her shoulder. "Too late. It's already communing with me." Rex leaned in. "Also, the scoop says Henrietta Bell's back. That's got to be related, right? The song, the house, the missing mom?" "Her disappeared mom," Juniper corrected. Calla held up a hand. "One at a time. What have you heard?" Juniper pulled out her phone and opened what appeared to be a private town gossip tracker disguised as a weather app. "At 3:17 yesterday, the clock started ticking," she said. "And around the same time, Wren's bouquet wilted prematurely." Calla blinked. "Wren's flowers don't wilt." "Exactly. That's what triggered my terror alert. Also," Juniper lowered her voice, "Greensleeves played from inside the Bell house last night. My friend lives next door. She swears she saw a light in the attic." Rex nodded solemnly. "The Bell house hates secrets." Calla glanced toward the red shelf again. It was only a matter of time before it hated lies, too. Calla waited until 3:10 p.m. before leaving the shop. She locked up with one hand while the other gripped her notebook like it was armor. Baxter trotted beside her, leashless and focused, tail low. The Bell House sat on the edge of Summerwind's historic district, far enough from the bustle to feel forgotten, but close enough for gossip to echo. Its porch sagged like a broken smile, and the shutters hung askew. One still bore the faint outlines of painted roses, now faded to rust-colored ghosts. Calla climbed the front steps slowly. The wood creaked beneath her boots. Baxter paused on the last step, nose in the air, then gave a short growl and sat. She knocked. Once. Twice. No answer. She tried the door. Unlocked. Of course it was. This was Summerwind. Doors were like secrets. Everyone had them, but they didn't always stay shut. Inside, the house smelled of dried lavender and thyme. Dust lay thick on the banister, and the air was cool enough to raise goosebumps. The piano in the parlor stood open. Sheet music scattered across the top, the same unfinished melody. Greensleeves. The notes on the staff matched the scrap she'd found. Same shaky penmanship. Same June 3rd, scrawled at the corner. Calla stepped closer. Henrietta Bell sat slumped over the keys. For one awful moment, Calla thought she was dead. But then the woman stirred. Barely. Her head lolled to the side, lips parted. A teacup sat on the piano bench beside her, half drunk, faintly almond scented. Calla's instincts kicked in fast. She checked the pulse at Henrietta's neck, grabbed her phone, and dialed 911. Possible poisoning, she told the dispatcher. Early. She's breathing. Get here quick. She didn't move the cup, didn't touch the piano, but she took a long look at the cracked rim of the porcelain. Pale pink roses, gilded edge. She knew that pattern. It matched a teacup she'd sold years ago to an estate sale broker, the same broker who'd cleaned out this house. The pieces were coming together, and none of them were pretty. Baxter stood watch at the parlor door, growling, low and constant. This time, she didn't tell him to hush. Henrietta survived. The paramedics arrived quickly, and the tea tested positive for bitter almond. Cyanide, most likely from an old vial left among her mother's forgotten medicine cabinet. Sheriff Margot Ellis stood in the hallway an hour later, arms crossed, eyes hard. She claims she didn't know the tea was poisoned, Ellis said. She didn't, Calla replied, but someone did. Calla handed over the sheet music, now sealed in a plastic sleeve. Her mother never finished this, probably never meant to, and yet it turned up, tucked, behind a clock that ticks for the dead. Ellis gave her a look. You always make my job harder. You're welcome. Henrietta, pale but recovering, sat propped in a hospital bed later that evening. Calla visited, arms folded, clocked the IV and oxygen with a quick glance, then asked, "Why come back now?" Henrietta's eyes didn't meet hers. "I found something last week, a letter, hidden in a box of old recital programs. My mother never left town. She was sick and scared. She wrote that someone had been in the house, someone who threatened her if she ever spoke about the inheritance, about money that disappeared." Calla sat quietly for a moment. "And you thought the house might still remember?" "I thought if I played the song, maybe something would answer." Calla stood to leave. Something did. Back at the shop, the clock had gone silent. Calla reset its label. Item, the clock that stopped twice. Status, dormant. Note, tipped for 3 consecutive days. Stopped after Henrietta Bell's hospitalization. Additional, music box activity linked. Possible emotional echo? Further observation required? She penciled one last line beneath the printed tag. Still watching. Baxter circled once, then flopped beneath the red shelf with a sigh that said, "For now." Outside, the wind stirred. The chimes didn't move, but deep in the shadows, the music box gave one soft, almost imperceptible click, the kind that meant it wasn't quite finished yet. Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.